Hey everybody, it's Spencer with Utah Rustic Design. Last video I talked about some tips and techniques to distress wood, and today I want to go over some tips and techniques to paint, glaze, and stain distressed wood.
Okay, so I'm using what's called a stain pad to apply this stain. You can use a brush. I just prefer to use these stain pads because they're soft. They soak up stain really easily and they're super fast. As you'll notice, I'm just trying to coat the entire piece of wood. Be real liberal with the stain. Don't be afraid to apply it, and you want to get deep down in all the cracks and the grooves. It's really hard sometimes to see if you've got into them, so the more stain you put on, the better off you'll be. Once you apply the stain, you can just come back through after 4 or 5 minutes of letting it soak in and then dry it off with a paper towel. I've got my paper towel now, and I just want to go over it lightly. I just want to knock off the really heavy parts of the stain that's still remaining. I've let this sit for 4 or 5 minutes. It's just important that you kind of let each piece sit about the same amount of time so the stain soaks in about the same amount, and then just go over it, make sure you hit all the cracks, and just try to get it dried off evenly. The paint I'm using only requires 1 coat. It's a little more expensive, but it's well worth it in my opinion, just to have to apply it 1 time. I take a little 4-inch foam roller and just kind of spread it out evenly. Doesn't make a big difference if you don't get it exactly even. As you'll see, I'm going to just go over this piece and brush it on. It's not super even, but I'm not real worried about getting all the corners or edges either. Everywhere where the wood's showing eventually will show stain when I glaze over it a little later on. It's just important to try to do the same thing with each piece you're using if you're using multiple pieces. Other than that, it's just kind of however you like it. I like it to have a lot of stain show through and variation.
Okay, so we've painted it and it's dried. Now as you can see, when I put the paint on, I left some spots that just natural. I wasn't too worried about getting paint everywhere, and you'll see why when I stain it. I'm also going to run the sander over it just lightly, briefly, to knock off some more of that paint so that more of the stain will stick to the wood. I think it just gives it a better look that way. So. One thing I like to do is I like to hit the edges and sides, especially high, because I don't want to have more wear on the middle than on the sides. Most of the time it's more natural to have wear on the sides and on the edges than it is in the middle, so I'll hit those sides a little bit better. Okay, so I put the stain on really liberal. Want to make sure I get it everywhere. You want to let this sit on there for a few minutes, 2 to 3 minutes at least. Don't be afraid that actually the more stain you put on, the easier it is to wipe off. If I put a really thin coat on, it'd be really, really hard to wipe off. The other thing I like to do is make sure you get it in all those cracks, all those grooves. Remember that knot hole that I made? That's an artificial knot hole. Okay, so once I get my stain on, I get it nice and thick. I'm going to put a really thick coat on. I'll come over and grab my paint thinner. You can see how that works. Just gets all that glaze off or stain off. You can really do it to whatever color you like. I like it a little bit brighter than this, so I'll just keep working it. And make sure you use a really good absorbent, high quality paper towel. If you don't, it'll just spread it around, push it around. You want to get it to absorb all that stain up off there. I like this because it's a little bit cleaner look. The brighter it is. You can see where that sander, where I came through on that sander, you can see some of the areas where it hit, and then some of the areas that I just left unpainted. I think it just kind of gives it a little bit more character and dimension, and kind of points out the areas that we distressed earlier. You can see with that knot hole that I made with that chisel, it looks pretty authentic. Most people wouldn't know that that was something that was made with a chisel. It kind of looks like a knot. Just keep working as much as you want till you get the color you like. If you're doing multiple pieces, you'll want to line them all up and just match them off the first piece and just kind of go from there. If you want to have it darker on these edges, then you want to leave that stain on a little bit longer. You can go back through and restain it again if you want to too, and that might help it a little bit, but that's kind of the color I was looking for, so I'm pretty happy with that. So here's our other one. We stained the ebony. You can see the difference there. Okay, I'm just going to use a gloss clear spray. You can use other stuff you can brush on as well. I just find this is the easiest thing to do, especially for small projects. Might not necessarily be the cheapest thing, but when you're using a small project like this, rather than get a brush dirty and throw that away, I'd rather just use this. And also it works pretty good upside down as well. So it just needs a little coat. As you can see, we've got the final finished product. I just wanted to share a couple tips and techniques that I've used in the past for painting and glazing distressed wood, and also for staining distressed wood. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, leave it in the comments section. I'd love to have some feedback. Also, if you missed the first video where I distressed the wood to get it to look like this, make sure you check it out. I've got the link there below. I'm Spencer with Utah Rustic Design. Remember that the project today will keep idleness away.